In the world of medicine, there are moments that define not just careers, but entire lives. This is the story of Dr. Samuel Rodriguez, a pediatric surgeon whose faith in healing was shattered by tragedy, and 8-year-old Tommy Mitchell, a boy whose simple words would restore hope to a broken man. If you enjoy emotional stories that touch the heart and remind us of the power of human connection, don't forget to like and subscribe for more inspiring content. The fluorescent lights of Seattle Children's Hospital hummed their familiar tune as Dr. Samuel Rodriguez walked through the corridors at 3 in the morning. His footsteps echoed against the polished linoleum floors, each step carrying the weight of 23 years in pediatric surgery. At 51, Samuel had performed over 4,000 operations, saved countless young lives, and earned the respect of colleagues worldwide. Yet tonight, none of that mattered. 3 months ago, everything changed. The case that haunted his dreams involved 7-year-old Emma Chen, a bright girl with pigtails who loved butterflies and drawing pictures of her family. She had come in with a rare cardiac condition, one that Samuel had successfully treated dozens of times before. The surgery should have been routine. Emma should have been home, chasing butterflies in her backyard and showing her parents her latest artwork. Instead, Emma never woke up from the anesthesia. The investigation cleared Samuel of any wrongdoing. The hospital review board concluded that sometimes, despite perfect technique and flawless execution, the human body simply fails to respond. Medical complications, they called it, an unfortunate outcome in an otherwise exemplary career. The words felt hollow, meaningless in the face of Emma's parents' grief and his own crushing guilt. Samuel stopped at the window overlooking the city. Seattle's skyline stretched before him, thousands of lights representing thousands of lives, thousands of families sleeping peacefully while he wandered hospital halls like a ghost. He pressed his palm against the cool glass, remembering how Emma's mother had collapsed in the waiting room when he delivered the news. The sound of her anguish still rang in his ears, a constant reminder of his failure. "You did everything right, Sam." The voice belonged to Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the hospital's chief of staff and Samuel's longtime friend. She approached quietly, her own exhaustion evident in her posture. "You can't keep torturing yourself like this." Samuel didn't turn around. Her birthday would have been next week, 8 years old. Her mother called yesterday to tell me they're having a memorial service instead of a party. His voice cracked slightly. She wanted to invite me because Emma always talked about the nice doctor who was going to fix her heart. Jennifer placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Samuel, in 23 years, you've saved more children than most surgeons see in their entire careers. One tragic outcome doesn't erase all the good you've done, doesn't it?" Samuel finally faced her, his eyes red-rimmed and hollow. "Every time I pick up a scalpel now, I see her face. Every time I make an incision, I hear her mother crying. How can I trust my hands when they failed the one person who needed them most?" The conversation was interrupted by the sharp beep of Jennifer's pager. Emergency surgery, pediatric trauma, a car accident involving a family of 4. Multiple casualties incoming, including 2 children. Jennifer's expression grew grave as she read the details. "Sam, I need you on this one. Both kids are critical, and you're the best pediatric surgeon we have." Samuel shook his head, backing away. "I can't. Find someone else, Dr. Martinez, or call in Dr. Thompson from home. Anyone but me." "Samuel Rodriguez, listen to me." Jennifer's voice carried the authority of someone who had run the pediatric department for 15 years. "Those children are going to die if you don't operate. Whatever demons you're fighting, whatever guilt you're carrying, 2 innocent kids are about to pay the price for your self-doubt." The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. He knew she was right, but the fear was paralyzing. What if he failed again? What if his trembling hands, his shattered confidence cost another child their life? The weight of Emma's death already threatened to crush him. He couldn't bear the thought of adding another name to his list of failures. "I submitted my resignation letter to administration yesterday," Samuel whispered. "After 23 years, I'm done. I can't do this anymore, Jennifer. I can't be responsible for another child's death." Jennifer stared at him in shock. You what? Sam, you can't be serious. You're one of the most gifted surgeons I've ever worked with. The children of this city need you. The children of this city need someone who won't fail them when it matters most. Samuel pulled off his surgical cap, running his fingers through graying hair. Someone whose hands don't shake every time they hold a scalpel. Someone who can sleep at night without seeing the faces of the children they couldn't save. The emergency room doors burst open, and the chaos of a trauma response filled the corridor. Paramedics rushed in with the first victim, a woman in her 30s with multiple injuries. Behind them came another stretcher, this one carrying a small form that couldn't have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Samuel's heart clenched as he caught a glimpse of the child. Dark hair matted with blood, a face pale with shock and pain, small hands clutching a torn stuffed animal. For a moment it could have been Emma lying there, and Samuel felt his knees nearly buckle under the weight of memory and regret. Sam, please. Jennifer's voice was desperate now. That boy needs you. Look at him and tell me you can walk away. But Samuel was already walking in the opposite direction, toward the exit, toward the parking garage, toward escape from the responsibility that had once defined his entire existence. Behind him, the sounds of medical emergency continued, but he forced himself not to look back. 23 years of dedication, 23 years of healing, 23 years of being the person parents called a miracle worker, all ending in the lonely echo of his footsteps as he fled from the very thing that had once given his life meaning. The elevator doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, and Samuel found himself staring at his reflection in the polished steel. The man looking back at him was a stranger, hollow-eyed, unshaven, wearing the exhaustion of months of sleepless nights like a second skin. When had he become this broken version of himself? When had the confident surgeon who could steady his hands through the most delicate procedures become someone who couldn't even trust himself to hold a coffee cup without trembling? The parking garage was nearly empty at this hour, filled mostly with the cars of night shift workers and on-call physicians who, unlike Samuel, still had the courage to answer when lives hung in the balance. His BMW sat in its assigned spot, the same space he had occupied for over a decade, a small symbol of the stability and routine that had once defined his existence. As Samuel sat behind the wheel, unable to start the engine, his phone buzzed with another message from Jennifer. This time he read it. Sam, the boy is asking for you by name. He described you perfectly, down to the scar on your left hand. This is impossible, but it's happening. Please come back. Samuel looked down at his left hand, at the thin white line that marked a moment of carelessness during his residency. A slip of the scalpel during a routine appendectomy, his first major mistake in surgery, requiring 12 stitches and serving as a permanent reminder of the precision required in his profession. How could a child he had never met know about that scar? How could anything about this situation make sense? But even as the rational part of his mind sought logical explanations, another part of him, the part that had chosen medicine because he believed in healing and hope and the possibility of miracles, whispered that maybe some things didn't need to make sense to be true. Samuel sat in his car in the hospital parking garage for 47 minutes, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Through the concrete barriers, he could hear the distant wail of ambulances, the organized chaos of medical personnel fighting to save lives. He should have been up there, scrubbed in, focused entirely on the delicate work of pediatric surgery. Instead, he was hiding like a coward, paralyzed by fear and consumed by guilt. His phone buzzed with text messages from Jennifer, from Dr. Martinez, from nurses who had worked with him for years, all of them asking where he was, all of them needing him to be the surgeon he had always been. Samuel turned off the phone without reading the messages. He couldn't face their disappointment, couldn't bear to explain how the great Dr. Rodriguez had finally broken under the weight of one tragic loss. The drive home to his empty apartment took 20 minutes through Seattle's quiet early morning streets. Samuel had never married, never had children of his own. His life had been entirely devoted to saving other people's children, to being the steady hand and calm voice that parents trusted with their most precious gifts. Now, Without that identity, he felt completely lost. 23 years of being the steady hand and calm voice that parents trusted with their most precious gifts. Now, without that identity, he felt completely lost, adrift in a world that suddenly seemed devoid of purpose and meaning. His apartment reflected the Spartan life of someone who spent most of their time at the hospital. Medical journals stacked on every surface, their pages filled with the latest research and surgical techniques that he had once devoured with passionate interest. A few pieces of furniture that looked like they came from a catalog, chosen for function rather than comfort or style. The walls were bare except for his medical degrees and a single photograph of his parents, both gone now for over a decade, their faces frozen in time during a happier moment when their son's future seemed bright and full of promise. Samuel poured himself 3 fingers of whiskey, something he rarely did, and sat in his leather chair staring at nothing. The whiskey burned as it went down, but not as much as the memory of Emma's mother calling him yesterday. The conversation played in his mind like a broken record, each word etched into his consciousness with painful clarity. "Dr. Rodriguez, I wanted you to know that we're having a butterfly release at Emma's memorial service. She always said butterflies were angels, and you were her angel doctor. She drew you a picture the day before her surgery, sitting in her hospital bed with her crayons spread across the blanket, working so carefully to get every detail right. I thought you might want to have it." Samuel had hung up without responding, unable to find words that could possibly convey his devastation and guilt. The picture arrived by messenger later that day, carefully protected in a manila envelope, a crayon drawing of a man in surgical scrubs with a huge smile, standing next to a little girl with pigtails and a heart-shaped face. At the bottom, in careful 8-year-old handwriting, "Dr. Rodriguez is the best doctor ever. He fixes hearts and makes everything better." Now that drawing sat on his coffee table like an accusation, a reminder of the trust he had betrayed and the innocence he had failed to protect. Emma had believed in him completely, had drawn him as a hero in her child's understanding of the world, and he had let her down in the most fundamental way possible. Samuel drained his glass and poured another, welcoming the numbing effect of alcohol. Maybe if he drank enough, he could forget the weight of surgical instruments in his hands. Maybe he could forget the rhythm of heart monitors and the desperate hope in parents' eyes. His phone rang at 6 in the morning. Jennifer's name appeared on the screen, and Samuel almost didn't answer. But something compelled him to pick up, perhaps the last vestiges of professional responsibility that hadn't yet been extinguished by guilt and self-doubt. "Sam, thank God." Jennifer's voice was exhausted but relieved. "I need you to come in, not for surgery, just to talk. The boy from last night, Tommy Mitchell, he's been asking for you. I don't understand. He doesn't even know me. That's the strange part. When he woke up from emergency surgery, the first thing he said was that he needed to talk to Dr. Samuel. He described you perfectly, Sam. Dark hair with gray at the temples, kind eyes, the scar on your left hand from your residency. He's never seen you before, but somehow he knows exactly what you look like." Samuel looked down at his left hand, at the thin white scar he'd gotten during his 2nd year of residency, when his inexperience with a particular instrument had resulted in a slip that required 12 stitches. How could a child he'd never met know about that scar? "Jennifer, this doesn't make sense. I wasn't even in the building when they brought him in." "I know it doesn't make sense. Nothing about this case makes sense. The boy should have died, Sam. His injuries were catastrophic. Dr. Martinez said it was the worst pediatric trauma he'd seen in 15 years. But somehow this kid pulled through. And now he's asking for you specifically." Samuel felt a chill run down his spine. "What about his family? His parents?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "That's the other thing, Sam. His parents didn't make it. The accident killed them both instantly. Tommy's alone now, and he's 8 years old, and for reasons none of us can understand, he believes you're the person who's supposed to help him." 8 years old. The same age Emma would have been next week. Samuel closed his eyes, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. A child alone in the world, calling for him specifically. Felt like the universe was playing a cruel joke, offering him a chance at redemption, while simultaneously reminding him of his greatest failure. I can't, Jennifer. I can't face another 8-year-old child. I can't risk failing another family. Sam, this boy has no family left to fail. He has no one except the medical staff taking care of him, and for whatever reason, he believes you're important to his recovery. I'm not asking you to operate. I'm not asking you to take responsibility for his medical care. I'm just asking you to talk to a scared, orphaned child who somehow knows your name. The line went quiet except for the sound of both of them breathing. Samuel could picture Jennifer in her office, probably surrounded by the same chaos that had consumed her life for years, trying to balance the needs of patients with the limitations of staff and resources. She had always been the one person who could cut through his self-doubt and remind him why he became a doctor in the first place. What did he say exactly? When he asked for me? He said, and I'm quoting the nurse here, "I need to talk to Dr. Samuel Rodriguez. He has kind eyes and a scar on his left hand, and he's very sad right now. I can help him remember why he became a doctor." Jennifer paused. "Sam, how does an 8-year-old boy who just lost his parents and nearly died himself know that you're struggling with your calling?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Samuel had spent 3 months running from anything that reminded him of his failure, avoiding the hospital when possible, declining social invitations, isolating himself from everyone who might remind him of the life he used to live. But somehow, a child he had never met knew not only his name and his appearance but his emotional state. "I'll come in," Samuel heard himself saying. "But just to talk to him, nothing else. I'm not putting on scrubs, I'm not entering an operating room, and I'm not taking responsibility for anyone's medical care." "That's fine, Sam. He's in room 412. The nurses will be expecting you." After Jennifer hung up, Samuel sat in his chair for another 20 minutes, staring at Emma's drawing. The crayon figure of himself looked so confident, so sure of his purpose. The little girl beside him radiated trust and hope. When had he lost that certainty? When had healing become something to fear instead of embrace? He showered, dressed in civilian clothes instead of scrubs, and drove back to the hospital he had fled from just hours earlier. The morning shift was in full swing, nurses and doctors moving with practiced efficiency through corridors that had been home to Samuel for over 2 decades. Several colleagues nodded or waved, but he could see the questions in their eyes. Where had he been during the emergency? Why wasn't he answering his pages? What was happening to their dependable Dr. Rodriguez? Room 412 was in the pediatric wing, decorated with cheerful murals of animals and rainbows that were supposed to make children feel less afraid. Samuel paused outside the door, his hand on the handle, gathering courage to face whatever waited inside. Through the small window, he could see a small figure in the hospital bed, sitting up and looking directly at the door, as if he had been expecting Samuel's arrival at that exact moment. Samuel took a deep breath and stepped inside, unprepared for what he would find, and unaware that his life was about to change forever. Tommy Mitchell was not what Samuel expected. Despite the bandages covering half his head, despite the various monitors and IV lines attached to his small body, despite having just lost both parents in the accident that nearly killed him, the boy's eyes were startlingly alert and peaceful. He looked at Samuel with a recognition that seemed impossible, as if they were old friends meeting after a long separation. "Dr. Samuel," Tommy said softly, his voice hoarse from the breathing tube that had been removed just hours earlier. "I knew you would come." Samuel approached the bed cautiously, still struggling to understand how this child could know him. "Hello, Tommy. I'm Dr. Rodriguez. How are you feeling?" "My head hurts, and my chest feels tight, but that's okay." "The hurt will go away soon." Tommy shifted carefully in the bed, wincing with the movement. "You're sadder than I expected. The little girl's death wasn't your fault, you know." The words hit Samuel like a physical blow. He sank into the chair beside the bed, staring at this impossible child who somehow knew about Emma. "How do you know about that?" Tommy's eyes, large and brown and far too wise for an 8-year-old, studied Samuel with compassion that seemed beyond his years. "I see things sometimes. I saw you in the parking garage last night, crying in your car. I saw you at home looking at the picture the little girl drew for you. She's not angry with you, Dr. Samuel. She wants you to know that." Samuel's hands began to shake. This was impossible. Tommy had been unconscious, fighting for his life in surgery while Samuel sat in his car. There was no way this child could know about Emma's drawing, about his tears, about the depth of his guilt and self-recrimination. "Tommy, I think you might be confused. You've been through a terrible trauma, and sometimes our minds play tricks on us when we're hurt and scared." "I'm not confused." Tommy's voice was gentle but certain. "I know my parents are dead. I know I was in a car accident. I know Dr. Martinez operated on me for 6 hours to fix my broken ribs and stop the bleeding in my brain. I also know that you were supposed to be in that operating room with him, but you were too scared to come." The matter-of-fact way Tommy spoke about his parents' death was heartbreaking. No tears, no hysteria, just a quiet acceptance that spoke of a child who had experienced far more than any 8-year-old should have to endure. Samuel found himself leaning forward, drawn into this strange conversation despite his confusion and fear. "Tommy, I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't imagine how difficult this must be for you." "They're not really gone," Tommy said simply. "They're just different now. My mom wanted me to tell you that healing isn't about never losing patience. It's about caring so much that every loss breaks your heart a little bit, because that's what keeps you human." Samuel felt tears welling up in his eyes. Those words could have come from his own mother, who had been a nurse before her death 10 years ago. She had often talked about the importance of maintaining compassion in medicine, about how the doctors who cared the most were often the ones who suffered the most when they couldn't save someone. "Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was, but she wasn't the one who told me that." Tommy looked directly into Samuel's eyes. "Emma told me. She's been trying to talk to you for 3 months, but you won't listen. You keep pushing her away because you think she's angry with you." Samuel stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over the chair. This was too much, too impossible to process. A child he had never met was claiming to communicate with another child who had died on his operating table. It was either an elaborate delusion brought on by trauma, or something that challenged everything Samuel believed about life and death and the nature of reality itself. "I need to go," Samuel said, backing toward the door. "I'm sorry, Tommy. I hope you recover fully, but I can't do this." "Dr. Samuel, wait." Tommy's voice was urgent now, desperate. "She showed me something. Something about you that no one else knows. Something that happened when you were 8 years old. Just like me and just like her." Samuel froze with his hand on the door handle. There were things about his childhood that he had never told anyone, experiences so painful that he had buried them deep in his memory and never spoke of them, not even to therapists or close friends. "What did she show you?" Samuel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Tommy's expression grew sad, and for the first time since Samuel entered the room, he looked like the scared 8-year-old he actually was. "She showed me the accident, the one where your little brother died. She showed me how you tried to save him, how you put your hands on his chest and pressed like you had seen on TV, how you breathed into his mouth even though you were just a kid yourself. She showed me how the paramedics found you still trying to bring him back even after they knew it was too late." Samuel's legs gave out, and he collapsed back into the chair. The memory came flooding back with devastating clarity. His 6-year-old brother Daniel falling from the old oak tree in their backyard, hitting his head on the concrete patio with a sickening thud that Samuel could still hear in his nightmares. 8-year-old Samuel, home alone with him for just 20 minutes while their mother ran to the store, trying desperately to apply the first aid he had seen in movies and television shows. The endless minutes waiting for the ambulance, performing CPR on his little brother's still form, refusing to give up even when Daniel's lips turned blue and his skin grew cold to the touch. The paramedics had found Samuel still working on Daniel, still breathing into his mouth and pressing on his chest, his small hands sticky with blood and tears streaming down his face. They had to physically pull him away from his brother's body, and even then he had fought them, screaming that he could save Daniel if they would just let him try harder, if they would just give him more time. "Nobody knows about that," Samuel whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I never told anyone what really happened that day. The official report said Daniel died from his injuries before help arrived. I never told anyone that I tried to save him, that I spent those 20 minutes trying to bring him back." Emma knows. She says that's when you decided to become a doctor, when you were 8 years old and couldn't save your brother. She says you became a pediatric surgeon because you wanted to be the person who could save other people's little brothers and sisters. She says losing her hurt so much because it brought back all the pain from Daniel's death, all the feelings of helplessness and failure that you thought you had buried. The tears came then, 25 years of suppressed grief pouring out of Samuel in great racking sobs that shook his entire body. He had spent decades in therapy, dealing with his brother's death, had thought he had processed the trauma and moved beyond it. But Emma's death had torn open that old wound, had brought back all the helplessness and guilt he had felt as an 8-year-old boy who couldn't save the person he loved most in the world. Tommy watched Samuel cry with infinite compassion, this small boy who had just lost his own parents offering comfort to a grown man who had lost his way. The sight of this child's empathy, his ability to hold space for another person's pain while dealing with his own unimaginable loss, only made Samuel cry harder. After several minutes, Samuel managed to compose himself enough to speak. "Even if what you're saying is true, even if Emma somehow forgives me, it doesn't change the fact that she's dead because I failed her. It doesn't change the fact that I can't trust my hands anymore." "But you can," Tommy said with absolute certainty. "Emma wants to show you something else, something about why she had to die, and why you're going to save so many more children because of what happened to her." Samuel looked at this extraordinary child, this boy who seemed to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, who spoke of impossible things with the matter-of-fact certainty of someone describing the weather. Everything rational in Samuel's mind rejected what Tommy was saying, but his heart, the part of him that had been broken by Emma's death, was listening. "What does she want to show me?" Tommy smiled then, the first truly childlike expression Samuel had seen from him. "She wants to show you the children you haven't saved yet, all the ones who are waiting for Dr. Samuel Rodriguez to remember who he really is." Tommy closed his eyes and reached out his small hand toward Samuel. "Take my hand, Doctor. Samuel, let Emma show you what she wants you to see." Samuel hesitated. Everything in his medical training told him that this child was experiencing some form of trauma-induced hallucination, that the head injury and emotional shock had created elaborate fantasies as a coping mechanism. But the specificity of Tommy's knowledge, the details about Daniel's death that Samuel had never shared with anyone, made him question everything he thought he understood about reality. Slowly, Samuel reached out and took Tommy's hand in his own. The boy's palm was warm and surprisingly steady for someone who had undergone major surgery just hours earlier. As soon as their skin made contact, Samuel felt a strange, tingling sensation, as if a gentle electrical current was flowing between them. "Close your eyes," Tommy whispered. "Let yourself see." Against every rational instinct, Samuel closed his eyes. At first, there was only darkness, the familiar black void behind his eyelids. But gradually, images began to form, hazy at first but growing clearer and more vivid with each passing second. He saw a little girl with dark curls and a bright red coat, maybe 4 years old, running toward a busy street while her mother was distracted by a phone call. A car was approaching fast, the driver not seeing the child until it was almost too late. In the vision, Samuel saw himself running, reaching the girl just in time to sweep her out of harm's way. The grateful mother's tears, the child's laughter as she hugged his neck, the knowledge that his quick reflexes had prevented a tragedy. The scene shifted. Samuel saw himself in an operating room, but not as the broken, fearful man he had become. This version of himself moved with confidence and precision, his hands steady as he performed a complex cardiac procedure on a newborn infant. The baby's parents waited in the hallway, holding each other and praying for a miracle. When Samuel emerged from surgery hours later, his smile told them everything they needed to know before he even spoke the words, "Your daughter is going to be fine." Another shift. Samuel saw a teenage boy, maybe 15 years old, brought to the emergency room after a motorcycle accident. Multiple injuries, including severe abdominal trauma that threatened to end his life before it had truly begun. In the vision, Samuel worked tirelessly through the night, his team following his lead as he navigated the delicate work of repairing damaged organs and stopping internal bleeding. The boy survived, went on to graduate high school, attend college, become a teacher himself. One life saved, rippling out to touch hundreds of students over the course of a career. The visions came faster now, a montage of faces and moments that felt more real than memory. Children of all ages, from different backgrounds and circumstances, but all sharing one common thread. They lived because Dr. Samuel Rodriguez found the courage to continue practicing medicine. Some were emergency cases like Tommy, brought in broken and barely alive. Others were scheduled surgeries, planned procedures to correct birth defects or remove tumors or repair hearts that weren't formed quite right. In every vision, Samuel saw not just the successful surgeries but the lives that followed. Birthday parties and first days of school, graduation ceremonies and wedding days, children of their own. Each life he saved went on to touch other lives, creating an ever-expanding web of connection and purpose that stretched far beyond the operating room. But the most powerful vision was yet to come. Samuel saw himself, older now, maybe in his 70s, with silver hair and gentle wrinkles around his eyes that spoke of decades of laughter and tears, success and loss, all woven together into a life fully lived. He was training a young resident who reminded him of his own younger self, eager, talented, but struggling with the weight of responsibility that came with holding human lives in your hands. The resident was struggling with a particularly difficult case, hands shaking with nerves and self-doubt, as she prepared for a complex heart surgery on a newborn. Samuel placed a gentle hand on the young doctor's shoulder and spoke words that seemed to come from somewhere beyond his own experience, wisdom earned through years of triumph and tragedy. The greatest surgeons are not the ones who never lose patience. They are the ones who care so deeply about every patient that each loss becomes a lesson. Each success becomes a reminder of why we do this work. You will lose patience, and it will break your heart every time. But you will save far more than you lose, and the ones you save will go on to save others in ways you may never know. The love you pour into your work doesn't disappear when someone dies. It transforms, becomes part of the healing energy that flows through this hospital, through all hospitals, connecting every doctor and nurse and patient in an invisible web of care and compassion. The young resident listened, absorbed the wisdom, and went on to become a renowned pediatric surgeon herself, carrying forward the lessons Samuel had learned through his own journey of loss and redemption. The cycle continued. Knowledge and compassion passed from one generation to the next, all because Samuel had found the strength to move beyond his own grief and fear and step back into his calling as a healer. Samuel opened his eyes, still holding Tommy's hand, tears streaming down his face. The visions had felt more real than his own memories, more true than anything he had experienced in his waking life. He looked at Tommy, who was watching him with those impossibly wise eyes. "Was that real?" Samuel asked. "Will those things really happen?" "They can," Tommy said simply. "It depends on what you choose to do next. Emma says the future isn't fixed. She says every choice we make creates new possibilities, new paths forward. The children in those visions are real children who will need help someday. Whether you're the one who saves them depends on whether you remember who you really are." Samuel sat back in his chair, overwhelmed by what he had experienced. The visions felt like a gift and a responsibility at the same time, a glimpse of the good he could still do if he found the courage to try again. "What about you, Tommy? What happens to you in these visions of the future?" Tommy smiled, and for a moment he looked exactly like the 8-year-old boy he was supposed to be. "That's the best part. I get to help you remember. I get to be the one who shows you that Emma isn't angry, that your brother Daniel understands why you couldn't save him, that all the children you couldn't help want you to keep helping the ones you can. I don't understand. How is that possible? How can you know these things? I don't really understand it either, Tommy admitted, but ever since the accident, ever since I was in that place between living and dying, I can see things differently. I can see the connections between people, the love that doesn't end just because someone dies, the way healing spreads from one person to another like ripples in a pond. Samuel thought about his own near-death experience during a climbing accident in his 20s, the sense of peace and understanding that had washed over him as he lay injured on the mountainside waiting for rescue. He had dismissed it later as oxygen deprivation and shock, but maybe there was more to such experiences than medical science could explain. Tommy, there's something I need to ask you, something important. Samuel leaned forward, his voice gentle but serious. You've lost your parents. You're all alone now and you're going to need people to take care of you. What do you want to happen next? Tommy was quiet for a long moment, considering the question with the gravity it deserved. When he finally spoke, his words would change everything for both of them. I want to stay close to you, Dr. Samuel. Not because I need someone to take care of me, though I do, but because I think maybe we need to take care of each other. You need someone to remind you why healing matters, and I need someone to show me how to use this gift I have to help other people. Samuel felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the tight knot of grief and guilt that had lived there for 3 months. For the first time since Emma's death, he could imagine a future that held purpose and meaning rather than just endless regret. Are you saying you want me to adopt you? Tommy nodded solemnly. If you want to. Emma says it would be good for both of us. She says you need someone to love, and I need someone to love me back. She says that's how healing really works. Not just fixing what's broken in people's bodies, but fixing what's broken in their hearts, too. The adoption process would take months, Samuel knew, involving home studies and psychological evaluations, background checks and interviews with social workers who would need to be convinced that a 51-year-old bachelor could provide a stable, nurturing environment for a child with Tommy's unique circumstances and apparent abilities. But from the moment Tommy asked the question, Samuel knew that his answer was yes. Had probably been yes from the first moment he looked into those impossibly wise brown eyes. Something had fundamentally shifted in their conversations over the past week, something that went beyond rational explanation or medical understanding. This child had somehow reached into the deepest parts of Samuel's broken heart and begun the work of healing that Samuel couldn't do alone. The connection between them felt ancient and inevitable, as if they had been searching for each other across time and space without knowing it. Over the following days, Samuel found himself spending more and more time in Tommy's hospital room, drawn there by a force he couldn't name or explain. The boy was recovering well from his injuries, showing a resilience that amazed the medical staff. His broken ribs were healing ahead of schedule, the swelling in his brain had resolved completely, and his cognitive function showed no signs of impairment despite the severity of his initial trauma. But more than his physical recovery, it was Tommy's emotional strength that left everyone who met him speechless. He spoke about his parents' death with a peaceful acceptance that seemed impossible for an 8-year-old. And he talked about his future with Samuel as if it were already decided, already written in some cosmic book of destiny that only he could read. The social worker came by again today, Tommy told Samuel on Thursday afternoon, his voice stronger now that the breathing tube had been removed for several days. Mrs. Patterson. She's a nice lady, but she worries a lot. She asked me a lot of questions about what I want to happen when I leave the hospital, whether I understand that my parents aren't coming back, whether I'm scared about living with someone new. Samuel sat down in his usual chair beside the bed. What did you tell her? I told her I want to live with you. She said it's complicated because you're not married and you work a lot of hours and you've never been a parent before. I told her that sometimes the most important things are complicated, but that doesn't mean they're wrong. The wisdom in Tommy's words struck Samuel deeply. How many times had he avoided difficult decisions because they seemed too complicated, too risky, too likely to result in failure. How many opportunities for growth and connection had he missed because he chose the safe, predictable path instead of the one that required courage? Mrs. Patterson also asked me about the accident, Tommy continued. About whether I remember what happened, whether I have nightmares, whether I'm angry about losing my parents. What did you tell her about that? Tommy was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the Seattle skyline. I told her that I remember everything, but that remembering doesn't hurt as much as people think it should. I told her that my parents aren't really gone. They're just different now. I told her that being angry won't bring them back, but being grateful for the time we had together helps me feel close to them. Samuel marveled at this child's wisdom. At 8 years old, Tommy had achieved a level of acceptance and emotional maturity that many adults struggled to reach after decades of therapy and self-reflection. Whether his insights came from some supernatural connection to the deceased or simply from an unusually mature perspective on life and death, the result was the same. Tommy had found peace in the midst of unimaginable loss. Mrs. Patterson wants to meet with you tomorrow, Tommy said. She wants to talk about what it would mean for you to become my guardian, what changes you'd need to make in your life, whether you're really ready for the responsibility of raising a child. Samuel had been thinking about little else for the past week. The idea of becoming a father at 51, especially to a child with Tommy's unique circumstances and apparent abilities, was both terrifying and exhilarating. His life had been carefully structured around his medical career, his apartment chosen for convenience rather than comfort, his schedule built entirely around hospital demands. Everything would need to change. I've been thinking about that too, Samuel admitted. About what kind of father I would be, whether I could give you everything you need and deserve. You don't have to be perfect, Tommy said with a gentle smile. My dad wasn't perfect either. He got frustrated sometimes, and he made mistakes, and there were days when he was too tired to play with me after work. But he loved me, and I always knew that, even when he was grumpy or distracted or worried about grown-up things. The simplicity of Tommy's words cut through all of Samuel's anxieties about parenting. Love wasn't about perfection or having all the answers. It was about showing up, about being present, about caring enough to try even when you weren't sure you were doing it right. There's something else I need to tell you, Samuel said, his voice growing serious. About my work, about what happened before I met you. I submitted my resignation from the hospital. I was planning to quit being a surgeon entirely. Tommy nodded as if this wasn't news to him. Because of Emma. Yes, because of Emma. Because I lost faith in my ability to heal people. Because I couldn't trust my hands anymore. But talking with you, seeing those visions, it's made me think maybe I was wrong to give up. You weren't wrong to be sad, Tommy said gently. You weren't wrong to be scared. Emma says grief is just love with nowhere to go, and you loved her like you love all your patients. But she also says that love is supposed to keep moving, supposed to flow to other people who need it. Samuel felt tears welling up again. This child had an extraordinary ability to articulate profound truths in simple language that cut straight to the heart of complex emotions. Do you think I should go back to surgery? Do you think I can trust my hands again? I think your hands were never the problem, Tommy replied. I think your heart was broken, and broken hearts make everything else feel broken too. But hearts can heal, just like bodies can heal. Sometimes they heal stronger than they were before. The door to Tommy's room opened, and Dr. Jennifer Walsh entered with a clipboard and a concerned expression. She looked surprised to see Samuel there, dressed in civilian clothes rather than scrubs, engaged in what appeared to be a deep conversation with their young patient. Sam, I'm glad you're here. I wanted to talk to you about Tommy's case and about your resignation letter. Samuel stood up, suddenly feeling awkward about being caught in his unofficial visit. Jennifer, I can explain. Actually, you don't need to explain anything. Tommy has been telling everyone who will listen that Dr. Samuel Rodriguez is going to be his new father, and that you're going to start operating again soon. The whole pediatric staff is buzzing with curiosity about what's happening between you two. Tommy grinned from his hospital bed. I told them Dr. Samuel just needed to remember who he really is. Sometimes people forget important things when they're very sad, but that doesn't mean the important things stop being true. Jennifer looked back and forth between Samuel and Tommy, clearly trying to process this unusual situation. Sam, can I speak with you privately for a moment? They stepped into the hallway, leaving Tommy with a nurse who had come to check his vital signs. Jennifer closed the door behind them and studied Samuel's face carefully. You look different, she said finally. Better. More like yourself than you have in months. What's been happening in there? Samuel struggled to find words that would make sense to someone who hadn't experienced what he had experienced. It's complicated, Jennifer. He's an extraordinary child. He's helped me see things differently, helped me understand some things about Emma's death and about my own fears. Sam, I need to ask you this directly. Are you planning to withdraw your resignation? Are you considering returning to surgery? The question hung in the air between them. A week ago, Samuel would have said no without hesitation. The idea of holding a scalpel again, of taking responsibility for another child's life, would have filled him with paralyzing fear. But something had changed in his conversations with Tommy, in those impossible visions of futures yet to be lived. I think I might be, Samuel said slowly. I think I might be ready to try again. Jennifer's face lit up with relief and hope. Sam, that's wonderful news. The department hasn't been the same without you. We've all been hoping. She was interrupted by the sound of alarms coming from Tommy's room. Both of them rushed back inside to find the boy sitting up in bed, his eyes closed and his body trembling slightly. The monitors showed his heart rate and blood pressure spiking dangerously high. Tommy, what's wrong? Samuel asked, taking the boy's hand in his own. Tommy opened his eyes and Samuel saw urgency there that hadn't been present before. Dr. Samuel, there's a little girl coming, right now. She's in an ambulance with her daddy, and she's hurt very badly. Her name is Sophia, and she's 6 years old, and she has curly red hair like Emma did. Samuel felt his heart skip a beat. Tommy, how do you know this? I can see her. She fell off the playground equipment at her school, and there's something wrong inside her head. The doctors at the other hospital couldn't fix it, so they're bringing her here. She's going to need surgery, and she's going to need you to do it. Jennifer was already reaching for her pager, which had begun beeping urgently. She read the message and looked up at Samuel with amazement. Incoming pediatric trauma. 6-year-old girl, severe head injury, being transferred from Harborview. ETA 8 minutes. Tommy squeezed Samuel's hand tightly. This is why Emma wanted me to find you, Dr. Samuel. This is why everything happened the way it did. Sophia is going to live, but only if you remember who you are. Only if you trust your hands again. Samuel looked at Tommy, then at Jennifer, then back at Tommy. The moment of decision had arrived, the choice between fear and faith, between running away and stepping forward into the calling that had defined his entire adult life. Dr. Samuel, Tommy said softly, his voice carrying the weight of prophecy and the simplicity of a child's trust. Please don't let her die. And in those 5 simple words, please don't let her die, Samuel heard the echo of every parent who had ever entrusted their child to his care. Every patient who had looked at him with hope and faith. Every part of himself that had chosen medicine as a way to heal the world's brokenness, one surgery at a time. The paralysis that had gripped him for 3 months suddenly lifted. His hands stopped shaking. His heart rate steadied. The fear that had consumed him transformed into something else entirely. Purpose. Jennifer, Prepper 7. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Sam, are you sure? Are you ready for this? Samuel looked down at Tommy, who smiled at him with complete confidence and trust. I'm ready. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos that Samuel knew by heart. Scrubbing in, the familiar weight of surgical gowns and gloves, the bright lights of the operating room that had been his second home for over 2 decades. But everything felt different now. The fear that had paralyzed him was gone. replaced by a calm focus that he hadn't experienced since before Emma's death. 6-year-old Sofia Martinez lay on the operating table, her red curls spread across the surgical pillow like a crown of fire. The CT scan showed a subdural hematoma, bleeding inside her skull that was putting pressure on her brain. Without immediate surgery, she would die within the hour. With surgery, if everything went perfectly, she had a chance. Samuel looked down at his hands as he approached the table. They were steady, completely steady for the first time in 3 months. He thought of Tommy upstairs, probably watching through whatever mysterious ability allowed him to see beyond the normal boundaries of space and time. He thought of Emma, whose death had brought him to this moment of redemption. He thought of his brother Daniel, whose death had started him on this path toward healing. "Scalpel," Samuel said, and his voice was calm and sure. The surgery took 4 hours. Samuel worked with the precision and confidence that had made him one of the most respected pediatric surgeons on the West Coast. His team, many of whom had worked with him for years, seemed to sense that something fundamental had changed. There was no hesitation in his movements, no second guessing of his decisions. This was Dr. Samuel Rodriguez at his absolute best, the surgeon who had saved thousands of children over the course of his career. When the bleeding was stopped and the pressure relieved, when Sofia's brain activity returned to normal levels and her vital signs stabilized, Samuel allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced in months. The deep satisfaction of a life saved, a family preserved, a future made possible. "Beautiful work, Dr. Rodriguez," said Dr. Martinez, who had assisted in the surgery. "That was textbook perfect." Samuel looked down at his hands again, still gloved and steady. They had done what they were trained to do, what they had done thousands of times before. The doubt and fear that had made them shake for 3 months were gone, replaced by the quiet confidence that came from knowing his purpose. In the recovery room, Sofia's parents waited with the particular blend of hope and terror that Samuel knew well. Her father, a construction worker with calloused hands and worried eyes, stood up as Samuel approached. Her mother, a teacher with Sofia's same red hair, clutched her husband's arm as if anchoring herself against whatever news was coming. "The surgery was successful," Samuel said, and watched as relief flooded their faces. "We were able to stop the bleeding and relieve the pressure on Sofia's brain. She's going to make a full recovery." Sofia's mother began to cry, not the anguished tears Samuel had heard from Emma's mother, but tears of joy and gratitude and overwhelming relief. Her father shook Samuel's hand with both of his own, trying to find words adequate to express what he was feeling. "Thank you," he finally managed. "Thank you for saving our little girl." Samuel felt the familiar tightness in his throat that came with moments like these, the reminder of why he had chosen this profession in the first place. "It was my privilege to help her. Sofia is a fighter. She's going to do wonderfully." After speaking with Sofia's parents, Samuel made his way back to Tommy's room. The boy was sitting up in bed, his face bright with joy and satisfaction, as if he had been watching the entire surgery unfold. "You did it," Tommy said as soon as Samuel walked through the door. "You saved her. I could feel it when the pressure in her head got better. I could see her parents crying happy tears instead of sad ones." Samuel sat down in his chair, suddenly feeling the exhaustion that came after major surgery. But it was a good exhaustion, the kind that came from work well done rather than from running away from responsibility. "Yes, I did it. We did it. I don't think I could have found the courage without you, Tommy." "You always had the courage," Tommy replied. "You just forgot where you put it for a while. Emma says that happens sometimes, when people love too much and lose too hard. But the courage doesn't really go away. It just gets buried under the sadness until someone helps dig it out." Samuel thought about the visions Tommy had shown him, all those future children who would live because he had found his way back to surgery. Today, with Sofia, the first of those visions had become reality. How many more were waiting for him to discover his courage again and again? "Tommy, there's something I want to tell you. Something important." The boy looked at him expectantly, those wise eyes that seemed to see so much more than they should. I spoke with Mrs. Patterson this afternoon before Sophia arrived. I told her that I want to adopt you, officially and permanently. I told her that you've already saved my life in ways that matter more than medicine, and that I want to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the gift you've given me. Tommy's smile was radiant, the pure joy of a child whose deepest wish was being granted. What did she say? She said it would take time, that there would be paperwork and evaluations and home studies. She said they would need to make sure I could provide a stable, loving environment for a child with your unique needs and abilities. But she also said that the bond between us is obvious to everyone who sees us together, and that sometimes the most unconventional families are the strongest ones. Tommy reached out and took Samuel's hand, the same gesture that had started their extraordinary connection. Dr. Samuel, can I tell you something that Emma told me to tell you? Of course. She said to tell you that love doesn't end when people die. She said it just changes form, like water becoming ice or steam. She said the love you had for your brother Daniel helped you become a doctor. The love you had for her is going to help you save all the children you haven't met yet. And the love you're going to have for me is going to help both of us heal from all the sadness we've carried. Samuel felt tears running down his cheeks, but they weren't tears of grief anymore. They were tears of gratitude, of hope, of a future that suddenly seemed full of possibility rather than haunted by regret. There's something else, Tommy continued. Emma wants you to know that she drew another picture for you. It's not a real picture that you can hold in your hands, but it's a picture she drew in the place where she is now. It shows you and me together, and we're both smiling, and there are lots of other children around us. All the children you're going to save. All the children who are going to live because you remembered how to trust your hands again. Samuel could almost see that picture, could almost feel Emma's presence in the room with them, blessing this new beginning that had grown from the soil of loss and grief. The 3 months of darkness were ending, replaced by something he hadn't dared to hope for: redemption, purpose, and the family he had never known he needed. 6 months later, the adoption was finalized. Samuel Rodriguez became the legal father of Tommy Mitchell Rodriguez, and Tommy became the son who had saved his father's calling and restored his faith in the healing power of love. They moved into a house with a big backyard and a room painted blue with stars on the ceiling, because Tommy said Emma had told him that stars were just distant suns, lighting the way for people who had lost their direction. Samuel returned to surgery full-time, and his hands never shook again. He operated with a precision and compassion that seemed enhanced by his experience of loss and recovery. His colleagues noticed the change, the way he seemed more present with patients and families, more attuned to the emotional dimensions of healing, as well as the technical ones. Tommy thrived in his new home, excelling in school and making friends easily despite his unusual insights and abilities. He never spoke publicly about his gift for seeing beyond the normal boundaries of life and death, but he continued to provide comfort and guidance to other children in the hospital when Samuel brought him for visits. The staff began to think of him as their unofficial therapy assistant, the boy who somehow always knew exactly what to say to frightened patients and worried families. And on quiet evenings, when Samuel was tucking Tommy into bed, the boy would sometimes share messages from Emma, or updates on Samuel's brother Daniel, or glimpses of the bright futures awaiting the children Samuel would save in the weeks and months to come. These conversations became their special bond, the supernatural thread that had brought them together continuing to weave through their daily lives. The last entry in Samuel's journal, written exactly 1 year after Tommy's arrival in his life, captured the essence of their extraordinary journey and the profound transformation that had taken place in both of them. Today marks 1 year since Tommy came into my life and taught me that healing was never just about fixing what was broken in other people's bodies. It was about learning to trust that broken hearts can mend, that love survives death, that purpose can be reborn from the ashes of despair. Tommy taught me that sometimes the greatest gift we can receive is the chance to save someone else. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give is allowing someone else to save us. We are both healers now, in ways that go far beyond medicine. And I understand finally that this was always what Emma wanted me to learn from her death. That love multiplies when we share it, that healing happens when we open our hearts to the impossible, and that the most important surgery I ever performed was not on a patient's body, but on my own broken spirit, with the help of an 8-year-old boy who taught me to trust in miracles again. Today, Tommy told me he had another vision, this one about a medical school that will be built someday, where doctors are trained not just in the technical skills of surgery, but in the deeper arts of compassion and spiritual healing. He said Emma showed him this vision, a place where the boundary between medicine and miracles becomes beautifully blurred, where future generations of healers will learn to trust not just their hands and their minds, but their hearts and their souls. He said, "We'll build it together, father and son, surgeon and seer, two broken pieces that found each other and became whole."